If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror, we'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hello, this is Aaron West. I am the author of the A24 New Wave. In this book, I look at A24's output and I make the argument that we are in a new wave movement right now. A24 plays a major role. This book has a supplemental podcast where each episode is a brief conversation about an A24 related topic, whether an actor, director, or even a genre. As I continue research for the book and conduct interviews, I expect to record podcast episodes with people involved with the company. You can find the podcast at cinejourneys.com or wherever you find podcasts, and we are proud to be members of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Weirding Way Media.
Night, Mr. Walters.
You see that guy over there? No, he's an actor. The guy on the phone? He's a prize fighter. Me? I'm a cab driver. I'm the only cab driver in this place.
Good evening and welcome to Night, Mr. Walters, the Taxi Podcast. I'm HP, your co-host, and with me as always is my co-host, Father Malone. Father Malone, how are you this evening?
I just want to point out that courtesy is our motto and service is our business.
This is Taxi Season 3, Episode 13, Zen and the Art of Cab Driving. This was written by Glenn Charles and Les Charles, the Charles boys, the pride of Henderson, Nevada.
Brothers. We love the Charles boys, don't we? Are we the only ones shouting about the Charles brothers like on a frequent basis?
And episode was directed by Will Mackenzie.
What?
Another non-James Burrows episode? Oh, we got to get into this.
Maybe he was censured for all of his boom mic shadows in the previous episode.
He was doing his penance for poor technical issues in the last episode. So reminder before we get into that, we're doing these shows in broadcast order and not in order of filming. So this is the second episode of Taxi, not directed by James Burrows. But Will Mackenzie was a respected director who would go on to direct, among other things, Father Malone, both the Shakespeare parody and black and white noir episodes of Moonlighting. He was a very big Moonlighting guy.
He's one of Alan Arkish's compadres.
Have you talked to Alan about Will Mackenzie?
No, but I've spoken to him about Moonlighting because he directed a whole bunch of those episodes.
No kidding. Alan Arkish directed Moonlighting.
Ton of Moonlighting, yeah, like pivotal episodes. Alan Arkish did a lot more important TV, or important being, a subjective term. But remember the Ally McBeal dancing baby?
Mm-hmm.
Alan Arkish.
Wow. That is, because it's easy when you have somebody like Arkish, this little sidetrack, who's so well known for obviously Rock and Roll High School and Get Crazy, these big cult movies, but it's not like he didn't work in between all of these big cult projects. So I guess
the majority of his career has been on television, and he's done a lot of amazing work on television.
Yeah, I'll say. Have you featured any focus on that? I heard your interview with him, but I don't remember you talking about TV so much.
No, we haven't. I haven't sort of sat down and talked with him about his TV experience, other than a little bit off air about this and that. But I did end up bringing up that episode of his with. You and I were talking about it. There was an episode of Fame with the Don't Be Afraid of Moriarty. Holmes is here and he'll be sorry. There was a Sherlock Holmes musical. Alan Arkish directed that episode.
This episode title is obviously a play on the book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig, which was a sensation when it was published in 1974. I'm sure you've probably seen more than your share of used copies in bookstores and so forth. Maybe you've
Yeah,
even read it.
I've read it.
I've not read it. I've seen it a million times.
When I was trying to figure out the whole life on the road by Kerouac, and this is the sort of companion piece to that book, and of course, um, Highway 66, the television
Mm,
series.
that's true. It was a fictionalized account of a motorcycle trip that Pirsig made with his son in 1968. Now, for those who haven't read it, the journey is punctuated by a number of philosophical discussions and tangents which are attempting to connect the pursuit of the pure truths of early Greek philosophers to the modern day. And according to Wikipedia, Father Malone, it has become the best selling philosophy book of all time. And like I said, I can confirm I've been to a lot of used bookstores in my time, and there's always a hefty supply of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance in every store I've been to. So I think it sold a shitload of copies. Most of those copies made their way to used bookstores after the fact, but I've never read it. It's one of those books like you, I sort of felt like I had a questing phase where maybe I was thinking of philosophy a little more, but I've never read it.
It's really disposable philosophy. That's why you're seeing so many copies in bookstores.
And it's a very 70s thing, right? Where a lot of this pop psychology and philosophy was omnipresent in those days. So to me, it's kind of a reminder of the 70s. But anyway, that's what we're dealing with here with this particular episode. We open on a dramatic B-roll shot of a plane coming in for a landing at dusk.
Same one we saw in the Ruth Gordon episode.
Oh wow, you're so good at spotting these things when we've seen them more than once. I guess I gloss over them.
You know what? I'm weird in that if I'm covering a series, I will pick up one thing and just go with that. So, like I did the Night Gallery, I focused on sound effects. Here, I'm just B-roll man.
Yeah, you're keeping me honest. So we cut inside a cab. We can see Jim is driving. Two business-looking guys come in for a fare, and they ask Jim to take them to the Plaza Hotel. Jim struggles to think of where it is. He's fumbling around with a map to try and find these guys are getting very nervous about Jim, like not being able to drive them where
I would have gotten
they
out
want
of
to
the
go.
cab. As soon as the map came out, I would have gotten out of the cab.
I would have, because his whole affect. I mean, look, we love Jim because it's like a parasocial relationship with us at this point. These guys don't know who he is. If I saw this flaky stoner looking guy fumbling with a map, I'm with you. I'd be out of that cab in 2 seconds. Like, I'm going to find somebody who can take me where I need to go.
The look of Reverend Jim would give me pause. But if he started behaving in a professional manner, I'd be like, cool, he's getting us there. I don't give a shit. But if he's looking like that and then going, oh, let me pull out a map to get me to the Plaza Hotel, like one of the most, recognizable landmarks in New York City.
And you would figure if he's picking up passengers at the airport, the Plaza is probably someplace he's been to many times as part of that airport route. So yeah, I mean, I it's a little unsettling that he's fumbling around, but he manages to convince these guys to stay in the cab. He's going to get them there. So as he's driving, one of these guys is raving to the other one about the seminar that he attended, from which he attributes all of his success to this theory that he heard there called dynamic perfection. He says it's the secret to success, to getting what you want in life, and to happiness and everything else.
Sounds a little like est.
Est. What does est stand for, by the way? Do you know?
Extra stupid. Yeah, I don't know. Some of the T. Extra stupid training.
Could be, because est is what John Candy's character in Stripes, that's one of the many things that he tried out to control his anger, right?
Right, but he didn't have enough money.
He didn't have enough money, so that's why he joined the army. It's free,
He swallowed a lot of sadness. Well, a lot of pizzas.
My favorite moment of him is when he's playing poker with that guy and he's just ripping the guy off. He's like, you know what? If it was me, I'd go all in.
But that's me.
That's me. I'm Mr. Vegas.
Yeah.
I'm Mr. Vegas. Isn't this fun as he's like taking the guy's money?
Now, see, if you had two of these, you would have won. Are we having a good time?
Jim, being Jim, he ends up just driving them in a circle. He drives them back to the airport, which confuses these guys, and it's not ending well for Jim to drive these guys around. So we cut to the garage where Bobby, Tony, and Elaine are sitting around the card table. By the way, Father Malone, side note, did you notice that Elaine's hair is styled very differently than the previous bunch of episodes? Not just the last episode, but pretty much every season 3 episode.
Yeah, it's almost like a you know what it looks like? It looks like Linda from Bob's Burgers haircut. It's that kind of bob, like a weird sort of hybrid bob. But I would like to point out that this was they finally found a complementary shade of red to put on Elaine Nardo because she looked good. And that might be because the hair is framing her face so well, but still, you know me with red and Elaine.
Now, the reason for this is probably due in part to when this episode was actually filmed. Now, I'm always going on about order of filming, and everybody thinks it's tiresome, but
What was she making at the time?
No, this episode is a good example of this because this episode was filmed before the 3 already aired episodes that we've talked about. Elaine's Old Friend, The Costume Party, and Out of Commission. This was filmed way before all 3 of those, but it aired after all 3 of them. So just a little bit of insight into why I always hammer this idea that these they may be filmed, but they're shown out of order sometimes. This is an example of that. So a sullen Jim walks in with his bookings. He surveys the cabbies and declares them all a bunch of losers.
And then my favorite bit is that he waves them off in the most sort of like lazy manner. It's a great dismissive move on Christopher
It's a
Lloyd's
dismissive
part.
thing. Yeah. And we're not used to seeing Jim is usually either just so out of it and wasted, or he's cheerful in his own way. This might be the first time that he's completely, like you said, he's dismissive and kind of angry about something. Alex asks Jim if he's talking about them, and Jim replies, he's talking about you, he's talking about me, he's talking about all of us. But Jim says he's not going to be a loser for long. He's found the secret, which is this dynamic perfectionism that he heard these other this fair talking about earlier that night. Tony asks what he's talking about. Jim relates the story of his airport fair and the theory they've espoused. Jim says he's learned the secret that separates successes from losers like them. Bobby presses him on this secret, and Jim says it's very simple. Everyone, Father Malone, has something they want more than anything, a goal. Tony asks what Jim's goal is, but Jim says, he can't tell him that. He says he needs to be a doer, not a talker. Jim says he does have a goal, something he's always wanted, but he thought it impossible. His goal is big. Elaine asks, how do you reach your goal? And Jim says, do every little thing in your life perfectly. If you do that, eventually you'll reach your goal. So Jim is committed to doing every little mundane act in his life the best that he can. And that will, over time, that will add up to this ultimate success that he's searching for. Jim asks Lou what a good cab he pulls in for one night. And Louis replies, $150. Jim asks what his best night is. And Louis says, you once broke $12. Jim asks to drive again. He wants to go out and drive another shift. He wants a perfect shift. He leaves as we fade back into the garage later that evening, as Louis is frantically talking with a police officer on the phone about the apparently missing Jim. Now, this is where it gets kind of fun, Father Malone. He's talking to the officer about he says, well, his name's Jim, but he answers to this, that he's going through all these nicknames for
Mr. Halloween.
Is that one of the ones he says?
That's the second one he said. I thought, I'm Mr. Halloween. How dare you?
What caught my attention is the last name that he gives, that he says Jim will respond to, the Fog. Do you remember, Father Malone, back to the first episode of Night, Mr. Walters? We were going over the bios of all the actors. Or maybe it wasn't the first episode. Maybe it was the first Jim episode. We talked about Christopher Lloyd and a bit of his bio. And we mentioned, for folks who want to get caught up. We mentioned that actors like Carol Kane used to call Chris Lloyd the Fog. The Fog was Christopher Lloyd's nickname that other actors gave him. I thought that was a great little Easter egg. I don't know where Mr. Halloween comes from, but
I'm now very curious. Is that something else he's been called in his life?
it kind of called attention to itself for me because I think it was the only one that was clearly dubbed in after the fact. You know, they do sometimes, they'll dub it in and it sounds totally wrong for the scene.
Maybe they said something on set knowing they were going to say the Fog, and then they put it in an ADR to surprise Christopher Lloyd.
So Louis gets off the phone and tells the concerned assemblage that Jim is still out with his cab. He's been out there for almost 24 hours, and which makes them all frantic. Where could he be? Why is he, is he hurt? What's going on? While they're trying to figure out where he might be, Jim ambles back into the garage. Jim says he's been out there working towards his goal. Louis is beside himself with anger. He bursts in to declare that Jim is fired. Jim asks Louis to look at his trip sheet, but Louis refuses. He's like, I don't give a he doesn't say, I don't give a shit. But he basically says, I don't care. You're fired. Beat it. The other cabbies.
You're unemployed.
That's right. The other cabbies protest, but Louis' mind is made up. Bobby asks Jim, like, why were you gone so long? Jim says he was so focused on perfection, he forgot about the time. He hands his bookings to Louis and essentially says, farewell, goodbye, everybody. And Louis opens the envelope and exclaims, $373 before stopping Jim from leaving and declaring that he loves him. Maybe there's something to this dynamic perfectionism, Father Malone.
Or maybe he should, if you drive for 24 hours in a cab, you're going to make some money.
We fade to commercial. We fade back in on Jim driving the cab at night. I really like this. We can see that he's given up his Canadian tuxedo for more traditional cabbie garb.
First time, right?
There's occasion where he might dress up like a party or something, but nominally he's always in his Canadian tuxedo. But now he's in a newsboy cap, Hawaiian shirt, and like a light jacket. He looks like an old-fashioned New York cabbie. Good for him. Fare gets in, and Jim proceeds to start in with the white glove treatment. He gives this preamble that reminded me of what you said up top, which is, welcome to Sunshine Cab, where our service is, your whatever. The fare asks to go to Carnegie Hall, and they start out. Now, Jim, we should note, is no longer fumbling with a map or making mistakes. He's way more focused. He gives updates on the traffic, the weather, even giving little sightseeing tidbits about
the history of the street. Used to be 6th Ave. Now it's Avenue of the Americas. But, us old New Yorkers still call it 6th Ave.
It's like half tour, half cab ride. He offers coffee to the fare in a thermos. He even has a selection of sandwiches in the back seat that he has like watercress, salami. I've never had a cab ride like that, but I'd love to get in and have the guy be like, we have a selection of sandwiches, sir. Would you like to try some coffee? It sounds delightful. The fare declares that it's the strangest cab ride he's ever had, which is, Jim says something like, well, if good service is strange, then call me a freak. And the guy says, you're a freak. He's really not on board with Jim up to this point, but they get to where they're going. They get to Carnegie Hall.
I love this bit. I love this bit.
He says to the guy, Jim says, did I get you here on time? And the guy has this change of heart. The guy says, yeah, you did. In fact, it's a little early. You know what? I think I will have some of that coffee. Can you maybe just take a drive around the block? He's been won over by Jim's like aggressive salesmanship in the car. And then Jim says, this might be what you're talking about. Jim says that there's a stereo headset in the back featuring a Sinatra retrospective. And the guy's like, oh, he picks up the thing, puts the headset on, and Jim picks up, it's like a funnel. It almost reminds me of a string with two cans on either side. And he puts the funnel to his mouth, and Jim starts singing All the Way, which is his idea of a Sinatra retrospective directly to the fare. It's hilarious.
I'd like to point out that the fare is the principal from Teen Wolf. Mr.
Really?
Thorne, the villain.
He's the one. Yeah, he had a rivalry with Teen Wolf's dad.
Yeah.
Didn't the dad make him pee his pants or something
That's right.
when he
They
was
were
in high
rivals
school?
for the same girl, but because he was a wolf, he had an
Yeah.
advantage, even though he looked like a Monchichi.
Everybody remember Monchichi? Anybody?
This episode came out in 1980, and if you saw it then, that was the last year of Gen X. Just
This is true.
wanted to remind everybody.
I'd love to know the breakdown of our audience. Like how many are I'm sure most everybody is probably above the age of 40, but that's just
Do
guesswork
you
on
know
my
that
part.
I was shocked to discover how many 18 to 35-year-olds listen to Midnight Viewing?
I'm not surprised by that because you're going over current, movies. These are very hot current properties like Weapons. That's a very popular movie now.
Yeah, but
Alien Earth.
what kid wants to listen to this old man? I don't know. Anyway,
You got the golden pipes, man. What can you say? We cut to the garage, and all the cabbies and Louis greet Jim like he's a conquering hero. They all want to know how much money he's pulled in. Louis confirms that the bookings that he's just brought in are a new company record. And Louis goes on to say Mr. Mackenzie has personally congratulated Louis on having the hottest shift in the company. Louis excitedly rushes off to Mackenzie to give him the bookings personally. Jim has turned himself around completely. Alex and the others congratulate Jim, who seems to appreciate being the best at something. But then he expresses some remorse at having to end it. You see, he's got everything he needs to complete his goal. Jim acknowledges that it was way too much hard work to keep up this greatest cabbie ever thing. And now that he's achieved his goal, he's just going to stop. He's going to go back to being the old Jim.
HP, can I just point out one thing that I used to drive rideshare for a while. I was a rideshare driver.
Yeah.
And when I began my rideshare journey, I had this episode of this show in mind.
Did you try to practice dynamic perfectionism?
I did, actually. When I started driving rideshare, if I were to have picked you up in the first month or so, then you would have been treated to bottles of water and little bite-sized candies and a charging port and a tissue. Do you need a tissue? I was prepared. I had non-threatening music playing.
Yeah.
Within a month, nobody gave a shit about any of that, and they were just wanted you to shut the fuck up and drive them wherever, and they just wanted to stare at their phone and whatever. And I was just like, I don't need to provide anything for anybody. They don't expect it. I'm not going to give it to them. Fuck them.
Yeah. Why put the effort in? Bobby asks Jim what the goal is, and Jim says, "Nope, you'll find out tonight." And he hands out these personal, handwritten invitations to all the cabbies to come to his house tonight, and he'll reveal his goal. Even Latka, who we haven't seen much of in the last couple of episodes, he's invited. They all go to Mario's to celebrate as we fade out. Now we fade back in. We're at Jim's ramshackle apartment, the one with the wall full of doors that we're not sure where they all go.
Which they do a subtle joke, which again, like he hears a knock at the door and he looks at the wall of doors, not knowing which one is which.
Yeah, he doesn't know where. Something in the middle of this apartment is covered in a variety of odd blankets and sheets. This is the goal that Jim is going to reveal to everybody, apparently. Jim goes to the door, lets all the cabbies in. They're all curious about what's under the blankets. Jim starts to this oration that he says something was missing in his life, Father Malone, but he discovered a miracle to fill this void in his life. The truth of the whole world is right here. The beauty, the ugliness, the heartache, the joy, the yin yang. He then asks the cabbies if they can guess what's under the blankets. Latka guesses that it's a statue of a spiritual leader, maybe a prophet. But Jim says, nope, that's not it. Finally, the suspense is too much, and he pulls the sheets down.
It turns out that Jim Ignatowski and my dreams are the same.
He pulls the sheets down, and it's, in essence, it's a big entertainment center. It's 6 TVs. It's got stereo speakers, VCRs, video discs, computer games, remote control, which he calls out specifically. He says he gets stations from all over, 24-hour news, 24-hour sports. A session of Congress is playing. He's got cable. He's got home cinema. He's got satellite. Now, before I go on, it's important for people, maybe younger people to remember, or even older people, that this was a time like cable TV wasn't even that prevalent at this time. You really only had three networks. That's what I had growing up. I just had three networks, right?
Three networks and affiliate stations. So we had TV 56 and 25 and channel 11 and
channel 38, but mainly it was channels 4, 5, and 7, NBC, ABC, and CBS. So this reveal, we'll get into the implications of it, but everything he has is very uncommon. This probably cost him thousands and thousands of $1980. Like we're talking, like the 24-hour news we take for granted now because we live in a 24-hour news cycle, but that's not the way it was then.
Brand new.
Totally, everything he has said is basically cutting edge.
This is basically like I've got the internet, because he's as hooked into media from the globe as you could possibly be in 1980 right here.
Completely, even to the degree of having home, he calls it home cinema, but that's essentially like HBO, cable stations when we were growing up. That was such, I can't overstate how much of a big deal having movies in your house, commercial free. What a revelation it was.
Kids today don't know. It was so amazing. All we had was you either see it in the movie theater and see it as it was presented originally, or you saw it on television where a bunch of nimrods had butchered it, cutting like dirty words out, and then panning and scanning. Now, the panning and scanning remained. However, at least we had the dirty words.
He talks about 24-hour sports. This was a time when, I think this still goes on to a degree, but you couldn't really watch games that were out of your effective radius of where you're living.
That's true, yeah. It was a national feed or nothing. Yeah, if ABC was showing you some game taking place in Seattle, then you got to see the Seattle game. Otherwise, for us, it was Red Sox or nothing. Or like you said, Yankees if we picked up fucking WPIX from New York.
From New York. And if you wanted to catch up on those scores, like either you had to catch the late news or you'd have to read the box scores in the newspaper. Newspaper the next day. So this, I have to make clear that it seems silly, but this was a big, big deal. All this technology that he has in his room or in his apartment. The other cabbies, they see this and they're incredulous. They think they're basically saying Jim busted his butt 24 hours a day, breaking all of these company records just to buy a TV. Bobby says he expected something more important since this was like a religious thing to Jim.
It is, motherfucker.
Jim says the whole world comes through these screens. He says just this afternoon, the Delaware legislature was debating whether to go by Delawareans or Delawareites. So he's plugged into this global news cycle now. The other cabbies feign how late it is. They're kind of doing that thing where you go, oh, geez, it's I got to get up early tomorrow, Jim. I think I'm going to hit the road. And they all start to leave in mild annoyance at this reveal that kind of like went over like the proverbial lead balloon. And just as they leave, Jim powers on this whole system. And there's something that captures each individual cabbie's attention. Bobby comes back in because he hears Apocalypse Now playing on one of the TVs. Elaine comes in because she hears the symphony. So she comes back in. Latka comes in because he hears the movie Submarine Commander with William Bendix.
William Bendix, absolutely. Good movie.
Which is a real thing. And Tony hears the Islander home game. Alex, of course, being Alex, he's the lone holdout. He self-righteously declares that he's not going to waste his time watching TV when there's a whole world out there with real people and real experience. But just then he hears the adjournment of the Delaware legislative session, which, by the way, the Delawareans won, which then catches his attention and he comes back in to watch.
And now they all gather by the glow of the 20th century campfire that is television. Can I just say, we grew up, look, television for the most part was very bad. Just like any medium, There's like 75% bullshit, and then you're dealing with 25% of gradations of good, bad, best, excellent, fucking genius, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was so pervasive and so, I don't know, it was always such an easy target. Like television rots your brain, because yes, a lot of the programming was terrible. But you know what? I love television. I always loved television. I always found interesting things to watch on television, even when we only had the affiliate stations and we had PBS. There was always something interesting to find. And then once around now, 1980, when what Jim is digging right now, once cable television came in and you could watch finally like reports from around the country, at least. Oh my god, what a revelation. Anyway, I love TV. Everyone who bagged on TV forever, you can suck it.
I'm with you 100%. I'll go a step further and say that in the days before cable TV, I almost think the programming was better to some degree. You couldn't get the movies that had played in the theater and all that, and that was a shame. But the Movie Loft was a show on Channel 38, and they would show movies that, maybe aren't even that popular now, but they had a knack for finding movies that were kind of interesting. Movies, there were events, like I remember they would show 2001: A Space Odyssey with a simulcast on the local rock station WBCN, which stereo TV was not a thing at this point. So you would literally you would turn on the radio station on your hi-fi setup, put the headphones on, flip the TV on to the station playing 2001. It was like, wow, stereo in my house, holy moly. I remember getting, when we first got cable, you would get these movie guides every month with a schedule of all the movies, what new movie premiered. And I'll never forget the episode guide, maybe a month or two after we got cable, was Apocalypse Now. Apocalypse Now's poster was on the cover. And as a kid, I went, oh, that looks kind of weird. I wonder what's up with that movie. And that was my introduction to Apocalypse Now. And you'd look in there and it would have a little synopsis, tell you what times. A premiere on HBO, for me at least, was a big deal. They would say, okay, Xanadu premiering on Thursday night at 8 o'clock. There's no premieres anymore. It's no big deal for cable to have like every Harry Potter or whatever. But then it was like a second movie premiere.
But it was a second movie premiere with the promise of watching it over and over and over again.
Over again, yeah.
That was new, everybody. Watching a movie ad infinitum was a new phenomenon.
I'm with you on that. I love TV. I grew up with TV. It's just an easy target. It's like, it's no different than years after that, people saying video games rotted your brain, the internet rots your brain, social media. Well, that actually happens to be true.
Yeah, exactly. The sort of rotting brain thing is always prevalent, and it's so silly, because the fact is, you can say, like, there's a golden age going on through streaming. You're still watching it on television, everybody.
Yeah. To be honest, I used to get on my kids' case when they would become obsessed with TikTok, or, my daughter's case, Instagram and Snapchat. But the thing of it is, when we were kids, it was video games, it was arcades, it was cable TV. So I get off my high horse a little bit, because I realized that if I was their age, I'd be doing the same exact thing. So it takes a different form, is my point. Alex has gone back in. Now we have this pan over the rapt faces of all the cabbies, as you describe. They're huddled by the television campfire. They're all watching this thing with great interest as the voiceover of Jim comes over. Now, I thought this was actually, there was something unsettling about his quote, and it's still unsettling for me even now when I think about it. We'll talk about it. He says, "Alex, you know the great thing about television? If something really important happens in the world anytime, night or day, you can always change the channel." And that's it. That's the end of the episode. We fade to black. Done. Let me ask you what you make of that quote.
There's always another great event coming, and you can't linger on one. And now you need to be more clued into the possibilities of other things occurring in your life. And now you have that opportunity, because you're given these avenues of information.
See, I would buy that explanation if he didn't include the bit about changing the channel. That's the unsettling part for me, Father Malone. If he just said, everything's happening in the world, all you have to do is turn on the television, I'd be like, yeah, you're right. Everything's happening. You just have to be open to it. But there's something kind of cynical in the way that quote winds up. To me, it almost seems like he's saying, look, why live life when you can watch it 24 hours a day? And guess what? You can leave out anything you want, no matter how important or how dire or how interesting. You can just change the channel.
I would agree with you if he said if you see something sad or troubling, you can always change the channel. But he says something great, which means to me, like I said, I think it means you can change the channel because there's more on the way. You found it here, but there's dozens of avenues where other greatness can come, and don't linger.
I hear your interpretation, and I don't disagree, but I guess I'm taking the more cynical approach, which is why
you're probably right. I'm completely bullshitting here, but
no, it's fine. But that's kind of what knocked me out about this episode. Getting ahead of myself here. That's the episode. Now we're going to talk yellow lights.
What does a yellow light mean?
A reminder, we're going to grade this episode on 1 to 5 yellow lights. 1 is the worst Taxi episode, and 5 is the best Taxi episode. As is our custom, Father Malone, we're going to throw it to you. What do you give Zen and the Art of Cab Driving?
It's a five yellow light episode, right? I mean, it continued that poignancy of the other one. It's got a weird ending, which troubled you.
Yeah.
But
in a good way, though. It made you question.
Made you think, yes. Yeah. And it's a gym episode, which are rare, and a very good gym episode. And it's all acted really well. I mean, it could use more of the other cabbies, but the way they end up being used is so perfect that I don't miss having A plot, B plot, C plot. I mean, a little more Louis we could have used, I suppose. Yeah. But as far as episodes that aren't catering to the ensemble, this is a 5 yellow light episode.
I wholeheartedly agree. This is a 5 yellow light episode. The gym episodes in general tend to be something special, and this one really delivers. Like I said before, I love the cynicism, my perceived cynicism of the final message of the episode. You can take it any way you want, but I chose to think of it in those terms. But it makes you think either way. It's well acted, it's well written, and it sticks with you, just like Out of Commission, the last episode we discussed. And again, if someone were to ask me what's the quintessential episode of Taxi, this would definitely be in the running. This is a classic Taxi episode, no question.
I patterned my life for a month after this episode, so how can I not give it 5 yellow lights?
5 yellow lights from myself, 5 from Father Malone. That's going to do it for this episode of Night, Mr. Walters. Father Malone, where can folks find you when you're not clocked into the garage?
Head on over to Midnight Viewing. That's my show twice a week, Mondays and Fridays. Lots of interesting stuff there. Check it out, y'all.
Indeed. In particular, I'm going to keep advocating for the weekly roundup with Ripley Jean. If you want to know what's new and good in streaming, in the theaters, that's your one-stop shop. It's great. So check that out. As for myself, I am in the midst of Yautja Fest with Father Malone over at Midnight Viewing. We're covering the Predator film franchise. We're up to Predator 2 with Alien vs. Predator available on Patreon, but that will be available more widely in a week or two. Is that right, Father Malone?
Well, I don't know when this is airing. It probably by the time this airs, it would have already been released to the public. What they're going to be waiting on is Alien vs. Predator Requiem, and that's going to be hilarious.
It's been a lot of fun for me, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So check it out. I host the Noise Junkies Music Podcast, and I'm an occasional guest on the Culture Cast with Chris Dashew, the new and improved Culture Cast with Chris Dashew. Can't wait to hear that. I also have a Bandcamp site, hpmusicplace.bandcamp.com. So thanks again for listening. Please feel free to subscribe to this podcast, write a review, or rate us. We'd love to hear from you. You can email me at hpmusicplace@gmail.com. Once again, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, Ivan.
Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies, inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.